Have you ever wondered what lies beneath the waves? Not just in the shallows where sunlight still dances, but in the deep, silent dark where time itself seems to hold its breath. The ocean is not merely a body of water. It is a world, a vast, living archive of Earth's history. It covers more than 70% of our planet, and yet we have explored less than 5% of it. In a sense, we know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the world beneath our own feet. A rather humbling fact, isn't it? When you look at the ocean from the shore, it appears calm, perhaps even simple. A blue horizon meeting the sky. But that surface is a kind of disguise. Beneath it lies a realm of extraordinary complexity, where mountains taller than Everest rise from the seafloor, and valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon sink into eternal night. The ocean is not flat. It is a planet within a planet. To understand its secrets, we must first understand its structure. What scientists call the ocean's zones. Near the surface lies the epipelagic zone, also known as the sunlight zone. Here, life is abundant: fish, plankton, coral reefs, and of course humans with their snorkels and questionable sunscreen choices. This zone extends to about 200 meters deep, roughly the height of a skyscraper. Sunlight still reaches here, feeding photosynthesis and allowing life to bloom in dazzling diversity. Below that, we enter the mesopelagic zone, the twilight zone. Light begins to fade, shapes blur. Many creatures here have evolved bioluminescence, the ability to glow in the dark. It's a world of quiet, flickering lights, tiny lanterns drifting in slow motion. The fish here look like something from a fever dream. Transparent, enormous eyes, glowing organs. They live in a perpetual dusk that never quite becomes night. Then comes the bathypelagic zone, the midnight zone. Here the pressure would crush a human submarine if it weren't specially reinforced. Sunlight never reaches this far. It's a world of silence and strangeness. Life moves slowly. Fish have jaws that unhinge, stomachs that can expand several times their size, and teeth that look like they were designed by a sleep-deprived artist. And yet, they are perfectly adapted to the dark. Go deeper still, and you reach the abyssopelagic and hadal zones, the deepest regions, found in ocean trenches that can descend more than 11 kilometers. The Mariana Trench, for instance, is so deep that if Mount Everest were placed inside it, its peak would still be more than a mile underwater. Down there, the temperature hovers just above freezing, and the pressure is more than 1,000 times that of the air above sea level. And still, life endures. Strange, soft-bodied creatures that drift like ghosts, feeding on what scientists poetically call marine snow, a polite term for the constant fall of organic debris from above. Yes, the deep sea is quite literally a world built on falling leftovers. It's almost poetic, or perhaps just a bit depressing, that so much life depends on the slow, gentle rain of microscopic death from the surface. But such is the balance of nature. Even decay has a purpose. The ocean is also a record keeper. Its layers hold the memory of the Earth, climate changes, volcanic eruptions, even meteor impacts. When scientists drill into the seafloor, they read its sediments like pages in a diary, millions of years long. The ocean remembers what we forget. Of course, the ocean's story begins long before humanity ever appeared. It began when the Earth itself was still young, around 4.4 billion years ago. At that time, the planet was a molten inferno. Water existed only as vapor in the atmosphere. But as the earth cooled, clouds formed and rain fell, and for thousands, perhaps millions, of years. Imagine that. Rain that never stopped. Eventually, this endless downpour filled the basins that became the first oceans. Some scientists believe that part of Earth's water came from icy comets that collided with the planet, carrying frozen oceans from space. In other words, the sea may have both terrestrial and cosmic origins, a mix of Earth and stars. It's a comforting thought that every wave carries a whisper of the universe. Once the oceans formed, life soon followed. The earliest organisms, simple, single-celled bacteria, appeared in the water roughly 3.8 billion years ago. For almost all of Earth's history, life existed only in the ocean. Everything we know, trees, birds, humans, began there. We are, quite literally, children of the sea. Our blood contains the same balance of salts as seawater. Our bodies are miniature oceans walking on land. It's funny to think that the ocean is both our cradle and, potentially, our grave. Should all else fail, the sea will still be here. Vast, indifferent, eternal. A reminder of our smallness and our origin. But let's return to the surface for a moment. To the human relationship with the ocean, which has always been a strange blend of fear and fascination. Ancient civilizations saw the sea as divine, a mysterious force beyond comprehension. The Greeks imagined Poseidon with his trident, moody and unpredictable. The Polynesians told stories of Tangaroa, god of the deep. The Vikings feared and worshipped Aegir, who brewed storms in his cauldron. In every myth, the sea is alive, powerful, temperamental, and deeply respected, and with good reason. For much of human history, venturing into the ocean was an act of pure courage, or madness, depending on your perspective. Wooden ships, guided by stars and hope, sailed into waters that seemed endless. Many never returned. And yet, exploration continued. The ocean was not just a barrier, it was a promise of discovery, trade, new lands, and occasionally, very bad luck with sea monsters. Even today, our technology has only scratched the surface of what lies below. The Challenger Deep, the deepest known point on Earth, has been visited by fewer people than the moon. Think about that. The moon, 384,000 kilometers away, is more familiar to us than the seafloor beneath our feet. It's as if the planet is playing a quiet joke, hiding its greatest mysteries in plain sight. The more we study the ocean, the more it humbles us. It regulates our climate, generates most of the oxygen we breathe, and absorbs enormous amounts of carbon dioxide. The ocean is not just a backdrop to life, it is life. And yet, we have treated it with a curious mixture of dependence and neglect. We draw food, energy, and inspiration from it, but we also pollute it, warm it, and fill it with plastic. Perhaps the greatest secret of the ocean is how much it forgives us. When you think about it, the sea's patience is astonishing. It has endured ice ages, asteroid impacts, and now humans, the latest and most self-confident of its experiments. And still, it moves with calm persistence, shaping continents, nourishing clouds, and whispering at the edge of every shore. As we drift deeper into this story, imagine yourself slowly sinking, not in fear, but in curiosity. The light fades, the sound softens, and you begin to feel the weight of the water. Ancient, quiet, eternal. Down here, there is no hurry. The ocean does not measure time the way we do. Its heartbeat is measured in tides, not seconds. And as we descend, we will uncover the ocean's deeper mysteries, its creatures, its currents, its moods, and the strange, beautiful truth of how this vast blue world came to be. If we were to travel back in time, far beyond the age of humans, beyond the dinosaurs, even beyond trees, we would find a world ruled entirely by the ocean. It's almost strange to imagine. No continents as we know them, no birds in the sky, no green forests swaying in the wind. Just endless water, stretching across a young planet under a pale sun. Life began here, in the most unlikely of places. Not in the calm surface waters, but in the deep, dark vents at the bottom of the sea. Around 4 billion years ago, volcanic fissures cracked open on the seafloor, releasing hot, mineral-rich fluids. These hydrothermal vents, still active today, created natural laboratories where chemistry slowly turned into biology. Inside those vents, simple molecules combined into complex chains, forming the building blocks of life. It's humbling to think that our entire evolutionary story may have begun in what was essentially a boiling underwater chemistry experiment. The first organisms were microscopic, single-celled bacteria and archaea. They had no lungs, no eyes, no brains. And yet they thrived. They fed not on sunlight, but on the chemicals spewing from those vents: sulfur, iron, methane. This process, known as chemosynthesis, was life's first innovation, a way to turn poison into energy. It's a bit like finding a way to make a living eating smoke, something humans would later attempt metaphorically, through the invention of the corporate job. Over time, these microbes began to spread. Some floated up toward the light, discovering photosynthesis, another brilliant accident of evolution. By using sunlight to turn carbon dioxide into sugar, they began releasing oxygen as waste. That waste, by the way, would eventually fill the atmosphere and make it breathable. So if you're listening to this while taking a deep breath, you can thank bacteria for that. For 2 billion years, the ocean was home to nothing but these microscopic pioneers. Imagine the patience of nature. Billions of years of quiet preparation before anything even grew a spine. And then, slowly, complexity began to emerge. Cells started working together, a revolutionary idea at the time. They formed colonies, then tissues, then bodies. Some learned to move, others developed shells. And eventually, around 600 million years ago, something miraculous happened. The Cambrian explosion. No, it wasn't an actual explosion, though that would have been more cinematic. It was a period of rapid evolutionary diversification, a biological boom that filled the ocean with an astonishing variety of creatures. In a geological blink of an eye, the sea transformed from a world of slime into a carnival of bizarre forms. There were trilobites, with their armored shells and curious eyes. Early worms that burrowed through the mud like nature's first miners. And predatory creatures like Anomalocaris, a meter-long hunter with circular jaws and flapping fins, essentially a shrimp designed by someone who had only read about shrimp secondhand. Coral reefs began forming, tiny colonies of polyps building vast limestone fortresses over millennia. These reefs became the first true ecosystems, bustling cities of life beneath the waves. Even today, coral reefs are among the most diverse habitats on Earth, home to more species per square meter than any rainforest. They are the ocean's memory of its own creativity. As the ages passed, some creatures began to experiment with new designs. Fish evolved jaws, a small detail that changed everything. With jaws, you could bite, chew, and defend yourself. Evolution, in essence, invented lunch. From there, the ocean became a battlefield of innovation. Some fish grew armor, others became fast and flexible. Sharks appeared, sleek, efficient predators that have barely changed in 400 million years. When you've been perfect that long, there's little reason to update the design. And then, in one of nature's more daring moves, some of these fish began to crawl. Literally. Fins became limbs. Gills became lungs. About 375 million years ago, creatures like Tiktaalik ventured out of the water and onto land. The first amphibians were awkward, slow, and probably deeply confused about what they were doing. But they succeeded. Life had escaped the ocean. It's a strange twist, really. After billions of years spent perfecting oceanic existence, evolution decided to reinvent the wheel and try life on land, like someone leaving a luxury resort to go camping in the rain. But the ocean didn't lose its importance. Even as life spread onto continents, the sea remained the planet's heartbeat, controlling the climate, cycling nutrients, and quietly sustaining everything above it. Today, when we look at marine life, we're seeing the descendants of those ancient pioneers. The tiny plankton drifting near the surface are echoes of the first photosynthetic microbes. The coral reefs are descendants of ancient colonies. The jellyfish, those graceful, translucent drifters, are among the oldest animal forms still alive. They have no brain, no heart, and yet they've survived mass extinctions that wiped out entire empires of creatures. Proof, perhaps, that simplicity has its advantages. Something we might all remember the next time we overcomplicate life. Of course, the ocean hasn't always been peaceful. It has endured cataclysms that reshaped the planet. Around 250 million years ago, during the Permian extinction, 90% of all marine species vanished. The seas turned toxic, the oxygen disappeared, and the Earth came close to becoming lifeless once more. And yet, from that devastation, life rebounded. It always does. The ocean is nothing if not persistent, a reminder that resilience is nature's quiet superpower. Then came the rise of the great marine reptiles, the ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs. These were the giants of the Mesozoic seas, ruling the water while dinosaurs ruled the land. Some grew longer than buses, with jaws designed to swallow sharks whole. It's remarkable how evolution always seems to produce something that terrifies everything else. Perhaps it's nature's way of keeping life interesting, or of ensuring no one ever gets too comfortable. As the ages turned, the ocean changed again. When the asteroid struck 66 million years ago, ending the age of the dinosaurs, it also devastated marine life. But the ocean adapted, as it always had. From the ashes of extinction emerged a new world, one filled with whales, dolphins, seals, and the ancestors of modern fish. Whales, in particular, are one of the ocean's most fascinating stories. They began as land-dwelling mammals, walking on 4 legs. Over millions of years, they returned to the water, their limbs becoming fins, their nostrils sliding to the tops of their heads. They traded the forest for the sea and became larger than anything that had ever lived. The blue whale, their most majestic descendant, is the largest creature in Earth's history. Even the mightiest dinosaurs look small by comparison. Its heart alone can weigh as much as a car. And yet, it lives in silence, singing low songs that can travel for hundreds of miles underwater. The largest animal on the planet, whispering into the dark. The ocean, it seems, inspires both greatness and humility. It gives rise to monsters and miracles alike, shaping life with both patience and violence. And through all this, the rhythm continues. Tides rising and falling, waves breaking and retreating, life endlessly evolving and adapting. The sea does not rush, it simply endures. When you think about it, the story of the ocean is also our own story, of transformation, persistence, and curiosity. We have come full circle. Creatures of the sea who walked onto land, built cities, and now gaze back at the waves wondering what we left behind. And perhaps that's why the ocean still fascinates us. It is both familiar and alien, comforting and terrifying, a mirror of the human soul, vast and restless, deep and unknowable. So, as you drift further into this story, imagine sinking once again, not into danger, but into memory. The deeper you go, the older the world becomes. Every layer of water is a layer of time. Every current carries whispers of what came before. If there is one thing the ocean teaches us, it's that intelligence takes many forms. Humans have spent centuries defining what it means to be smart, often assuming that logic, language, and tool use make us unique. But the sea, as always, has a way of humbling that idea. Beneath its waves live minds that think, plan, and feel in ways entirely different from our own. Let's begin with one of humanity's oldest friends, the dolphin. Sleek, social, and mischievously clever, dolphins have long fascinated sailors and scientists alike. Ancient Greeks considered them sacred messengers of the gods. Sailors believed they guided ships through storms. Even today, there's something disarming about their smile. Though, in fairness, that smile is permanent, a trick of anatomy rather than emotion. Still, it's hard not to project joy onto a creature that seems to enjoy surfing just for fun. Dolphins are part of the cetacean family, a group that includes whales and porpoises. They are mammals, warm-blooded, breathing air through a blowhole rather than gills. They live in tight-knit social groups called pods, where cooperation and communication are essential for survival. But their intelligence is what truly sets them apart. Dolphins recognize themselves in mirrors, one of the rare tests of self-awareness. They have complex social hierarchies, use distinct vocal signatures that function like names, and even coordinate hunting strategies that resemble military tactics. In the shallow waters of Florida, for example, bottlenose dolphins perform something astonishing. One dolphin stirs up the sandy seafloor in a circle, creating a ring of rising sediment. Fish, trapped inside, panic and leap over the ring, right into the open mouths of the waiting dolphins. It's teamwork, communication, and creativity all in one. And they invented it long before humans figured out fishing nets. They also seem to have a sense of play, that strange, almost philosophical behavior where an animal does something not for food, not for safety, but for the sheer joy of doing it. Dolphins have been observed passing around pieces of seaweed like a ball, riding waves alongside surfers, and even blowing perfect rings of bubbles underwater, then swimming through them as if applauding their own artistry. It's difficult not to wonder if they, too, experience wonder. And then there are whales, the philosophers of the sea. They move with a slowness that feels deliberate, as if each gesture is a meditation. Their songs, low, haunting vibrations that travel hundreds of miles, are among the most mysterious sounds in nature. The humpback whale, for instance, composes long, intricate melodies that evolve over time, changing with each season. These songs have structure, rhythm, and repetition, qualities we associate with music. We don't know exactly why they sing. Some scientists think it's a form of mating call. Others believe it's a form of communication far more complex. Perhaps it's both, or perhaps whales simply sing because they can. Their songs remind us that intelligence doesn't have to look like speech or writing. It can exist in sound, in movement, in silence. To listen to a whale's call is to feel time slow down, to realize that deep beneath the noise of human life, there are beings thinking in a language we will never fully translate. And yet, not all brilliance in the ocean comes from mammals. Some of it comes from creatures with no bones, no spine, and in one extraordinary case, no permanent body shape. Meet the octopus, the alien genius of the sea. Octopuses are, in many ways, the ocean's great paradox. They are solitary, short-lived, and soft, and yet their intelligence rivals that of some mammals. They can solve puzzles, unscrew jars, open latches, and even learn by watching other octopuses. In captivity, they've been known to escape aquariums through drain pipes, sneak into neighboring tanks to steal fish, and return to their own tank before morning. Imagine being the zookeeper who walks in and wonders why the fish population keeps mysteriously declining. Somewhere, an octopus is quietly smirking. Their brains are unlike ours, not centralized, but distributed. 2/3 of an octopus's neurons are in its arms, meaning each arm can taste, touch, and even make independent decisions. It's as if you had 8 smaller brains that could act on their own, which, admittedly, sounds both fascinating and exhausting. They change color and texture in an instant, not just to camouflage, but to communicate. Through a symphony of skin cells called chromatophores, they can flash patterns of emotion, calm waves, angry reds, or flashing warnings. Some scientists have even suggested that octopuses may think in colors and textures rather than words or sounds. Their language, quite literally, is written on their skin. And perhaps the most haunting fact of all, they live only a few short years. For all their brilliance, their time is fleeting. A female octopus lays thousands of eggs, tends them lovingly for months, and then dies soon after they hatch. It's a strange, poetic trait, a life of solitude and genius, followed by quiet sacrifice. It makes you wonder whether intelligence always needs a long life, or if sometimes even brief sparks of brilliance can leave a lasting glow. Other marine creatures display surprising cleverness too. Take the cuttlefish, a relative of the octopus, equally flamboyant in color and possibly even more cunning. Cuttlefish have been shown to pass the marshmallow test, a psychological experiment used on children to measure self-control. In the test, if they wait patiently, they receive a bigger reward later. The cuttlefish passed. In other words, they can delay gratification, a quality usually reserved for creatures who plan for the future. Not bad for an animal that looks like a floating croissant. Even fish, often dismissed as simple, show flashes of awareness. Certain species, like cleaner wrasses, recognize themselves in mirrors, suggesting some level of self-perception. And groupers have been observed cooperating with moray eels while hunting. The grouper signals the eel to flush out prey hiding in the reef, and they share the catch. It's a cross-species alliance, nature's original buddy cop partnership. We often underestimate the ocean's intelligence because it doesn't mirror our own. We look for speech, tools, writing, the markers of human thought. And when we don't find them, we assume there's nothing there. But the sea is full of minds that sense, feel, and reason differently. An octopus doesn't build temples, but it can build a shelter out of seashells. A whale doesn't write poetry, but it sings in a way that could move the stars. The ocean doesn't lack intelligence. It simply expresses it through forms we haven't yet learned to read. And then there's communication, the ocean's invisible conversation. Sound travels much farther underwater than in air. A whale's song can cross oceans. The clicking of dolphins forms complex patterns that may carry not just tone, but meaning. Even shrimp make noise. The infamous snapping shrimp creates one of the loudest sounds in the sea, strong enough to stun nearby fish. Imagine being a scientist trying to study marine life, while an army of tiny shrimp are popping like underwater popcorn. It gives background noise a whole new meaning. Some fish communicate through flashes of light. In the deep sea, where sunlight never reaches, bioluminescence becomes a language of its own. A Morse code written in blue and green. One species might flash a signal to attract a mate. Another might mimic that signal to lure prey. Down there, deception and beauty are often the same thing. Even coral reefs, though silent to our ears, are alive with communication. Fish make low grunts and pops. Crustaceans click. Parrotfish nibble loudly on coral. When researchers record the soundscape of a healthy reef, it buzzes like a living symphony. Dying reefs, by contrast, fall eerily quiet. It's as if the ocean's music fades when life does. And here's something both eerie and beautiful. When scientists play recordings of healthy reefs in damaged areas, young fish begin to return. The sound of life literally draws life back. The ocean, it seems, can heal itself if only we let it. When we study these creatures, dolphins, whales, octopuses, cuttlefish, even coral, we begin to see that intelligence is not one thing, but a spectrum. The ocean reminds us that consciousness may not be limited to humans or even mammals. It may flicker in forms we can barely comprehend. In the glow of a jellyfish, in the coordination of a school of fish, in the gentle rhythm of the tide. Perhaps the real secret is that the ocean itself is intelligent, not in the human sense, but as a vast, interconnected system that thinks through balance and movement. The currents act like veins, circulating warmth and nutrients. The coral reefs are its memory, the plankton, its breath. Every creature, from the whale to the worm, plays a role in maintaining its stability. If the earth is alive, then the ocean is its mind. And as you picture those depths, the lights flickering, the creatures gliding, the endless blue silence, you might begin to feel what countless generations before us have felt. Awe. That sense of smallness that is not frightening, but freeing. The understanding that we live not above the sea, but because of it. For as long as humans have existed, we've looked out at the ocean and thought, what's out there? It's one of those questions that's both brave and foolish. Like asking what happens if you touch fire. You find out quickly, but not always pleasantly. The first humans to venture into the sea didn't have compasses, maps, or even much understanding of what lay beyond the horizon. All they had were the stars above them, the wind in their faces, and an unshakable belief that something worth finding was waiting out there. And remarkably, often there was. The earliest sailors were the Polynesians, whose voyages across the Pacific remain one of the most extraordinary achievements in human history. Imagine setting out across thousands of miles of open water, guided not by instruments, but by the rhythm of the waves, the flight of birds, and the position of stars. They built canoes that could hold entire families, livestock, and supplies for weeks, sometimes months. These navigators memorized patterns in the ocean swells, the subtle rise and fall that told them where distant islands lay beyond the horizon. To them, the sea wasn't a void. It was a map, alive, breathing, and full of clues for those who knew how to read it. European explorers, by contrast, had a slightly different approach. More ambition, more arrogance, and occasionally, less success. When the Greek historian Herodotus wrote about the ocean in the 5th century BCE, he admitted he didn't really know where it ended. To the Greeks, the sea was both a highway and a boundary, something that connected the known world but warned against hubris. After all, in their mythology, anyone foolish enough to challenge the sea gods usually met a quick and soggy end. As time passed, humanity's relationship with the ocean grew bolder. The Phoenicians, skilled traders from what is now Lebanon, built sturdy ships that sailed across the Mediterranean and beyond. They followed the stars, just like the Polynesians, and charted coastlines long before modern maps existed. Their journeys connected cultures, spread ideas, and in some cases, spread more literal things, like olives, myths, and occasionally diseases. Civilization, it turns out, travels well by sea. Then came the age of exploration, that great chaotic chapter of history when the world's oceans became highways for curiosity and conquest. Figures like Vasco da Gama, Ferdinand Magellan, and Christopher Columbus set out to discover lands that, inconveniently for them, were already inhabited. Their journeys were perilous. Wooden ships, unpredictable storms, limited food, and maps that were more guesswork than guidance. Yet, for all their flaws and follies, these explorers changed the world. They proved that the oceans connected every corner of the earth, not as barriers, but as bridges. It's difficult to imagine what it must have felt like to sail into the unknown. Days stretching into weeks, the horizon never changing, the sea endless in every direction. The creaking of wood, the salt in your mouth, the feeling that the world might simply go on forever. It was terrifying, beautiful, and in some cases, extremely unpleasant, especially before anyone thought of inventing the concept of toilet facilities. And yet, the ocean rewarded those who dared. Trade routes were born, ideas exchanged, and the first global maps began to take shape. But those maps were, for a long time, a curious blend of fact and fantasy. If you look at medieval charts, you'll find the coastlines of Europe sketched with surprising accuracy. And then, just beyond them, drawings of dragons, mermaids, and sea serpents. When you don't know what's out there, imagination fills the gap, usually with teeth. The deeper mysteries of the ocean, however, remained untouched. For most of human history, the sea's surface was all we knew. The depths were the realm of myths, a place of monsters and gods. Even Aristotle, who was remarkably ahead of his time in many ways, once suggested that life couldn't exist in the deep ocean because sunlight couldn't reach it. 2,000 years later, we would find entire ecosystems thriving in total darkness, proving that even geniuses can have off days. By the 19th century, curiosity about the ocean had shifted from myth to measurement. Scientists began to wonder what really lay beneath. The invention of the telegraph sparked the first attempts to map the sea floor, mainly because people needed to lay cables between continents. When they did, they discovered something astonishing. The ocean floor wasn't flat at all. It had mountains, valleys, and ridges, landscapes as dramatic as any on land. It was as if a whole hidden earth existed beneath the waves. In 1872, the HMS Challenger set sail on what would become one of the most important scientific voyages in history. Over 4 years, the crew traveled nearly 70,000 nautical miles, measuring depths, collecting samples, and cataloging new species. By the end, they had discovered thousands of previously unknown organisms, from delicate glass sponges to creatures that glowed in the dark. The Challenger expedition laid the foundation for modern oceanography. It also proved something humanity had long suspected but never confirmed: that the ocean was far stranger than we could imagine. As technology advanced, so did our reach. Submarines allowed humans to dive deeper, cameras captured the unseen, and sonar painted pictures of the sea floor. Jacques Cousteau, the French naval officer turned filmmaker, introduced the world to underwater exploration in the mid-20th century. His documentaries revealed a universe of color and motion that few had ever witnessed. Before him, the ocean had been a mystery. After him, it became a wonder. But even with all our progress, the sea continues to surprise us. In 1960, Swiss oceanographer Jacques Piccard and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh descended into the Mariana Trench aboard the bathyscaphe Trieste. They reached nearly 11 kilometers down, the deepest point on Earth, and found, to their astonishment, signs of life. A small, flat, fish-like creature swam past their viewport, casually defying everything scientists thought they knew about pressure and depth. When they returned to the surface, Piccard reportedly said, "The bottom is fine and soft, like snow." It was a poetic understatement, as if describing the roof of another planet. Decades later, filmmaker James Cameron repeated that journey alone, piloting a submersible to the same depths. He described the experience as being like diving into green gelatin. That's one way to put it. Not many people can say they've been deeper than any mountain is tall, and return to tell the tale. Today, autonomous vehicles and deep-sea drones continue that exploration, mapping trenches, discovering new species, and revealing just how little we know. Even now, scientists estimate that there are millions of undiscovered organisms in the ocean. Some microscopic, others enormous. In 2020, researchers filmed a gelatinous creature shaped like a giant translucent donut, 3 meters wide, drifting in the dark like a living UFO. When asked to classify it, one scientist simply said, "We don't know what it is." That, in essence, is the ocean. 70% of our planet, and still largely an unsolved mystery. But for all our exploration, one truth remains constant. Every discovery raises more questions than it answers. Where does the deep ocean's heat come from? What creatures might exist in the trenches we've never seen? Could there be entirely new forms of life, built on biochemistry we don't yet understand? Each time we shine a light into the depths, we realize the darkness goes even deeper. And yet, perhaps that's part of the beauty. The unknown is not our enemy. It's our greatest teacher. The ocean humbles us, reminding us that knowledge is a horizon. No matter how far we sail, it keeps moving away. When you think about it, the story of ocean exploration mirrors our own story as a species. Restless curiosity balanced with fear, courage balanced with foolishness. We are creatures who build ships, sail into storms, and then, when we return home, complain about the sea spray on our glasses. It's our paradox. We are both fragile and fearless. From the first Polynesian voyagers to the modern deep-sea robots, every explorer, human or machine, has carried the same question in their heart. What's out there? And every answer, it seems, only deepens the mystery. Perhaps the sea doesn't want to be fully known. Perhaps its power lies in its secrecy, in the quiet reminder that there will always be something just beyond our understanding. And maybe that's exactly as it should be. Have you ever noticed how the ocean makes storytellers out of everyone? Even the most rational sailors, the ones who can tie 20 kinds of knots and navigate by the stars, begin to sound like poets after enough time at sea. Something about endless water changes the way the human mind works. It blurs the line between what's real and what might be. For as long as humans have sailed, we've filled the sea with creatures that might exist, and with good reason. The ocean hides more than it shows. A shape glimpsed through the mist, a shadow moving under the boat, a strange noise echoing through the waves. All it takes is one unexplained moment for imagination to take over. And once imagination gets involved, reality never stands a chance. The ancient Greeks filled their waters with gods. Poseidon, the bearded lord of the sea, ruled with a trident in one hand and a temper in the other. Sailors prayed to him before leaving port, hoping he'd spare them from storms. His mood swings, they said, could whip the sea into chaos or calm it into glass. The message was clear. Respect the ocean, or you'll be reminded who's in charge. The Norse had their own version of this. Aegir, the god of the deep, who hosted banquets for the gods in a hall beneath the waves. His daughters were the waves themselves, some gentle, some cruel. It's interesting how every culture gave the ocean a personality, not just a place, but a presence. The sea wasn't empty space. It was alive, moody, and deeply personal. But mythology didn't stop at gods. It also gave us monsters, a whole menagerie of creatures born from fear, fascination, and probably poor lighting conditions. Take the Kraken, for instance, the legendary sea monster said to dwell off the coast of Norway and Greenland. Descriptions varied. Sometimes it was a serpent long enough to wrap around a ship. Other times, a massive squid whose tentacles could drag sailors to their doom. When sailors saw the ocean heaving, the waves rising like something alive, they imagined a creature stirring below. In truth, they were often seeing giant squids, real animals that can reach lengths of 13 meters or more. That's nearly the size of a bus, with eyes the size of dinner plates. Honestly, that's terrifying enough without any embellishment. For centuries, though, the Kraken was considered myth, until the 19th century, when scientists began finding enormous squid carcasses washed ashore in Newfoundland and New Zealand. One French malacologist, Pierre Denis de Montfort, famously claimed they attacked ships. His evidence? He said he had seen a ship with its masts broken by a giant squid, which might sound absurd. But when you're a sailor in 1800 and a 30-foot tentacle drifts by, absurdity suddenly feels very plausible. And then there were mermaids. perhaps the most famous of all ocean myths. The idea of half-human, half-fish beings appears in almost every culture, from the sirens of Greece to the Ningyo of Japan. The Greeks imagined sirens as beautiful women with the voices of angels, voices so irresistible that sailors would crash their ships just to hear them more clearly. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus famously tied himself to his ship's mast so he could listen without being lured to his death. Which, frankly, sounds like something men have been doing ever since. Risking everything for a good story. But there's a scientific explanation hiding behind that legend too. Many historians believe mermaid sightings were actually encounters with manatees or dugongs, large, slow-moving marine mammals with gentle faces. To a lonely sailor who hadn't seen another human in months, squinting through sea mist and rum, a manatee might have looked close enough. Another legend told of the Leviathan, a biblical sea serpent so enormous it could block out the sun. Medieval scholars took this creature seriously. Maps from the Middle Ages often included drawings of it, coiled around the edge of the known world. For centuries, the ocean was believed to have literal edges, places where ships could fall off the earth. And even after that idea was disproved, sailors still feared what lay beyond. These myths served a purpose. They made the unknown understandable. If you can give the sea a face, even a terrifying one, it becomes less abstract, less infinite. The Kraken, the Leviathan, the sirens. They were all ways of saying, we don't know what's out there, but we know it's powerful. And in a world without sonar, satellites, or GPS, that was probably a very reasonable guess. But the line between myth and reality has always been thin. Some legends turned out to have truth hiding behind them. Take the coelacanth, a prehistoric fish thought to have gone extinct 66 million years ago. In 1938, one was caught off the coast of South Africa, very much alive. Scientists were astonished. It was as if a dinosaur had wandered into a modern city. Since then, dozens more have been found. The creature had survived, quietly defying extinction in the deep waters of the Indian Ocean. Imagine the humility of realizing that something you had declared long dead was, in fact, swimming peacefully under your feet. It makes you wonder how many other mythical creatures are still out there, simply living in the parts of the ocean we haven't yet explored. Remember, we've mapped more of Mars than our own sea floor. We're still guessing about what fills 95% of Earth's underwater world. For all we know, the next Kraken might just be waiting patiently for its scientific rebrand. And then there are the ghosts. The ocean has a long memory, and humans have a long history of giving it reasons to haunt us. Shipwrecks litter the seabed, silent museums of tragedy and courage. Each one tells a story of storms, battles, greed, or simple human error. The Titanic is the most famous, of course. That grand monument to human pride, claimed by an iceberg and swallowed by the Atlantic in 1912. But it's far from alone. Thousands of ships lie beneath the waves, from ancient Roman galleys to World War II submarines. Divers exploring them describe an eerie stillness. The wood long gone, the metal rusted and softened by coral, yet the shape remains, like bones under a thin blanket of sand. Sometimes fish swim through open windows, as if exploring what's left of the human world. There's beauty in that decay, a reminder that even in death, the sea recycles everything. And where there are wrecks, there are mysteries. The Bermuda Triangle, that famous patch of the Atlantic between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, has inspired countless theories about vanished ships and planes. Magnetic anomalies, alien abductions, time warps, take your pick. In reality, it's one of the world's most heavily traveled areas, and most disappearances have fairly mundane explanations. Storms, human error, equipment failure. Still, the legend endures, because the human mind loves a mystery more than a spreadsheet. Another ocean enigma is the so-called bloop, a low, powerful sound recorded by underwater microphones in 1997. It was louder than any known animal, and for years no one could identify it. The internet, naturally, went wild. Some thought it was a secret submarine experiment. Others were certain it was a sea monster awakening from hibernation. Scientists eventually traced it to ice quakes, massive chunks of Antarctic ice breaking apart and echoing underwater. So, no ancient creature from the deep, just physics. Still, the fact that an iceberg can sound like a monster tells you something about how alive the ocean truly is. Even in modern times, the sea continues to surprise. In 2012, a team of researchers exploring the Gulf of Mexico discovered a strange brine pool on the seafloor, a lake within the ocean. Its surface shimmered like liquid mercury, and anything that touched it, even a robot probe, instantly shut down. The dense, salty water was lethal to most life, yet teeming with bacteria that thrived in its toxicity. It was as if the ocean had created its own secret pocket dimension, a reminder that alien worlds might not be light years away, but just a few kilometers beneath our boats. And then there's bioluminescence, nature's magic show. Some nights, waves glow electric blue as microscopic plankton react to movement. Fish, jellyfish, and even sharks can shimmer with living light. Sailors once called it the sea on fire. Imagine standing on a dark beach, watching the surf sparkle with every step you take. No wonder people thought the ocean was enchanted. Even now, it feels like standing in a dream that refuses to end. The truth is, the ocean doesn't need myths to be mysterious. It is mystery incarnate. Every unexplained shadow, every sound in the dark, every shimmer beneath the surface, it all reminds us that we are guests here, not masters. And maybe, deep down, that's why we love the sea so much. Because in a world where we try to measure, control, and categorize everything, the ocean remains gloriously untamed, a living symbol of what we can't yet know. So the next time you see the horizon fade into mist and the water seems to stretch forever, remember, there are still dragons in the deep, not of fire and scales, but of mystery and wonder. The ocean keeps its secrets well, and that's what makes it beautiful. For all the beauty and mystery the ocean holds, there's a quieter story beneath it. One that isn't about monsters or gods, but about us. Because while we've spent centuries looking to the sea for inspiration, food, and adventure, we've also taken far more than we've given back. And now, for the first time in history, the ocean is changing. Not on its own rhythm, but because of ours. Let's begin with something we can't see but feel. Heat. Over the past century, the planet has been warming, not evenly, but steadily. The oceans have absorbed over 90% of that excess heat. Think about that for a moment. If not for the sea, the Earth's surface would already be unbearable for most life. The ocean has been our silent shield, swallowing our mistakes without complaint. But even the largest shield has limits. As seawater warms, it expands, and as ice melts, sea levels rise. It's a slow process, measured in millimeters each year, but relentless. Coastal cities that once felt permanent now face tides creeping higher, storms striking harder. The same forces that once shaped continents are reshaping them again, only faster. Coral reefs, those colorful underwater cities, are among the first victims. Coral lives in a delicate partnership with tiny algae that provide it with food and color. When the water gets too warm, the coral expels the algae, turning bone white, a phenomenon called bleaching. A bleached coral isn't dead, not immediately, but it's starving. If the stress continues, the reef collapses. And when reefs die, entire ecosystems disappear with them. Fish, crustaceans, plants, everything. Scientists call reefs the rainforests of the sea because of their biodiversity. They cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, but support nearly a quarter of all marine life. Without them, coastlines erode, fisheries decline, and millions of people lose both food and livelihood. It's heartbreaking and humbling. Because coral isn't fragile by nature, it's fragile because of us. Then there's plastic. The great paradox of human ingenuity. A miracle material that became a global curse. Lightweight, durable, and cheap. Perfect for packaging, bottles, and bags. Perfect, unfortunately, for never going away. Every year, around 8 million tons of plastic enter the ocean. That's roughly a garbage truck's worth every minute. Most of it doesn't float in neat, Instagram-friendly islands. It breaks down into microplastics, smaller than a grain of rice, drifting through the water like invisible dust. They're in the fish we eat, the salt on our tables, even the air we breathe. The ocean, once a cradle of life, has quietly become our landfill. And yet, here's the strange thing about plastic. It's also a perfect record of who we are. If future archaeologists or alien visitors ever study the layer of Earth that represents our time, they'll find a thin stratum of plastic. Toothbrushes, toys, bottles, straws. Our civilization, condensed into trash. We've left messages in bottles, but we forgot to stop throwing the bottles themselves. Still, the ocean isn't just a victim, it's a fighter. Even now, it continues to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, buffering the planet from even more extreme warming. But that generosity comes at a cost. When CO2 dissolves in seawater, it forms carbonic acid, lowering the ocean's pH. This process, ocean acidification, weakens shells, coral skeletons, and plankton, the microscopic drifters at the base of the food web. The smallest creatures are the first to suffer. And when they fall, everything above them trembles. But not all is despair. For every problem, there are people, quiet, stubborn, brilliant people, working toward solutions. Marine biologists are breeding heat-resistant coral species and replanting them on damaged reefs. Engineers are building biodegradable alternatives to plastic and inventing cleanup systems that skim trash from the surface. In the Netherlands, massive floating barriers now collect waste before it reaches the open ocean. A modern twist on the age-old Dutch fight against water. And then there's the effort to protect what remains untouched. Around the world, marine protected areas have been expanding. Regions where fishing, mining, and drilling are restricted or banned altogether. These zones act as safe havens, allowing ecosystems to recover and repopulate surrounding waters. Studies show that within just a few years, fish populations inside these sanctuaries can increase dramatically. Life, it seems, wants to come back, if we only give it the chance. One of the most hopeful developments comes from what's called blue carbon. The carbon captured and stored by coastal ecosystems like mangroves, seagrass meadows, and salt marshes. These humble habitats trap carbon up to 10 times more efficiently than forests on land. They're nature's quiet climate warriors, filtering water, protecting shorelines, and locking away carbon in muddy roots. Sadly, we've destroyed more than a third of them in the past century. But now, nations are beginning to restore them, realizing they are as valuable as any rainforest. Technology, too, is diving deeper. Autonomous underwater drones map coral bleaching in real time. Satellite systems track illegal fishing boats that once vanished into the night. And scientists are learning to listen to the ocean again, not through sonar pings, but by recording its natural soundscape. A healthy reef hums with crackles and pops from shrimp and fish. A dying one falls silent. By replaying these sounds, researchers can lure fish back to damaged reefs. The sea, it turns out, responds to music. But perhaps the most remarkable shift isn't technological, it's philosophical. For the first time, humans are starting to see the ocean not as an endless resource, but as a living system that we are part of. The old mindset that the sea is too vast to harm is fading. And with it, a new kind of humility is taking shape. Consider the concept of the ocean as a commons. An idea that what lies beyond national borders belongs to no one, and therefore to everyone. It's a beautiful thought, but also a dangerous one. Because when something belongs to everyone, it's easy for no one to protect it. That's why, in 2023, after decades of negotiation, nearly every nation on Earth finally agreed to the High Seas Treaty, a landmark accord aimed at protecting marine biodiversity in international waters. It was a rare moment of global cooperation, proof that once in a while, humanity can think like a single species. And maybe that's what the ocean has been trying to teach us all along, that everything is connected. The water that evaporates from one shore falls as rain on another. The same ocean current that cools Europe warms the Arctic. A whale that dies and sinks to the seafloor becomes a feast that sustains an entire ecosystem for decades. Life, death, balance, it's all one great circle, and we are just another ripple in it. Still, the task ahead is enormous. Climate change doesn't stop at the coastline. The melting Arctic threatens to disrupt ocean currents, potentially altering weather patterns for billions of people. The deep sea, once considered unreachable, is now being eyed for mining, as companies seek minerals used in modern technology. In other words, our hunger for progress continues to extend downward. Deep sea mining is a particularly controversial topic. The seabed is rich in polymetallic nodules, lumps of metals like cobalt, nickel, and manganese that could power electric car batteries and renewable energy systems. Harvesting them sounds tempting, especially for a planet trying to move away from fossil fuels. But the process involves scraping vast areas of sea floor, destroying habitats that have taken millions of years to form. Some scientists warn that the scars of such mining could last longer than human civilization itself. So we find ourselves in a paradox once again, trying to save the planet by exploiting it, It's the kind of moral puzzle Socrates would have enjoyed. Yet, amidst all of this, hope lingers, not loud or flashy, but steady, like the rhythm of the tide, because the ocean has endured far worse. It has survived asteroid impacts, ice ages, and mass extinctions. It is resilient beyond our comprehension. The question isn't whether the ocean will survive. It's whether we will survive with it. And that brings us, perhaps, to the most important truth. The ocean doesn't need us, but we need the ocean. It gives us half the oxygen we breathe, stabilizes our climate, feeds billions, and inspires our souls. To protect it isn't an act of charity. It's an act of self-preservation, and maybe even gratitude. So when you next stand at the shore, feeling that salt wind on your face, hearing the eternal rhythm of the waves, remember, you're listening to the heartbeat of the planet, a pulse that has been steady for over 4 billion years, and if we are careful, will remain so long after we are gone. Have you ever noticed how the ocean seems to quiet the mind just by being there? It doesn't demand your attention the way cities do. It doesn't ask you to be productive or to keep up. It just moves, endlessly, rhythmically, indifferently. The waves keep rolling in, no matter what you've done or failed to do that day. Maybe that's why so many people feel peaceful by the sea. It's a reminder that the world doesn't revolve around us. And somehow, that's comforting. Philosophers have always been drawn to the ocean. The Greeks saw it as the boundary between chaos and order. To them, crossing the sea meant venturing into the unknown, not just geographically, but spiritually. In Homer's Odyssey, the sea is both enemy and teacher. Odysseus spends years lost upon it, battered by storms, tested by temptation. And yet, it's through those journeys that he becomes wise. The sea in that story isn't just water, it's the symbol of life itself. Unpredictable, humbling, and at times beautifully cruel. Centuries later, Stoic philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius would use the ocean as a metaphor for reason. The world, they said, is like a vast sea. We cannot control the waves, but we can learn how to steer. That line still feels true today. No one can stop the tide, but we can learn not to panic when it changes. There's a kind of deep honesty in the ocean's rhythm. It has no illusions of permanence. Each wave crashes, breaks, and disappears, not as failure, but as part of the pattern. Watching it, you begin to understand impermanence not as loss, but as flow. The ocean teaches patience by doing nothing except being itself. Maybe that's why so many people say they find themselves at the beach. Which is ironic because the ocean doesn't care whether you find yourself or not. It's been there long before you, and it will be there long after. But maybe that's exactly why we find peace in its presence. It humbles us without humiliating us. It tells us we're small, but not meaningless. There's an old saying among sailors, "The sea finds out everything you did wrong." It's not meant as an insult. It's simply true. The ocean doesn't reward arrogance. You can't negotiate with it, or charm it, or outsmart it. You can only respect it. And in that respect, there's something cleansing, a kind of moral honesty that's rare on land. You see, on land, we can pretend to be in control. We can build walls, roads, cities, things that look permanent. But at sea, the truth is harder to ignore. You're surrounded by a force infinitely greater than yourself, and yet you have to move forward anyway. It's a humbling kind of courage, one that has shaped human character for thousands of years. Every culture that touched the ocean learned some version of humility, whether through storms, shipwrecks, or simply staring at the horizon long enough to realize how small we are. But humility isn't defeat. It's clarity. The ocean reminds us that we are part of something vast, and that our greatest wisdom might lie in accepting that vastness rather than trying to master it. That's why the ocean feels spiritual, even to those who don't believe in spirits. It's not that the sea contains mystery. It is mystery. And when we stand before it, we become a little quieter, a little slower, a little more aware of everything we don't know. There's an ancient Japanese concept called yugen. It means a deep, mysterious sense of beauty in the universe that can't be described in words. It's the feeling you get watching moonlight ripple over waves, or when fog rolls over a dark bay and the horizon disappears. It's not fear, it's reverence. The ocean embodies yugen perfectly. It's not there to explain itself. It doesn't need to. But let's not get too poetic. The ocean also smells weird. It's full of things that bite. And sand somehow finds its way into every conceivable place, including some that defy physics. Humility, after all, is best served with a sense of humor. Still, even those small irritations are part of the charm. The sea gives us so much and asks for so little, just that we pay attention. When you walk along the shore, you're literally walking on history. Every grain of sand is a story, a fragment of mountain worn down by rain, river, and tide. You're standing on the remains of something that once towered above the clouds, now softened into silence. It's geology's version of forgiveness. And when you listen to the sound of the waves, that steady hush like breathing, you're hearing the oldest lullaby on earth. Long before humans spoke, before we had language or reason or history, the sea was already whispering. It's no wonder we still fall asleep to its rhythm. It's the sound of home at the scale of the cosmos. Time itself behaves differently near the ocean. On land, we measure hours and deadlines. By the sea, time stretches, not endlessly, but enough to make you forget where you were in it. Maybe that's why so many philosophers, writers, and dreamers went there to think. Descartes meditated by the water. Nietzsche took long walks along the coast of Italy. Virginia Woolf wrote entire essays about the sea as a metaphor for consciousness. It seems the ocean invites introspection simply by being vast enough to contain it. And then there's the strange comfort of knowing that the ocean connects everything. If you dropped a bottle into the water off the coast of California, it might one day wash up in Japan. The same current that carries whales across the world carries our messages too, and our mistakes. There's poetry in that, and a warning. Nothing we do ever stays local for long. But maybe that's the point. The ocean is the great equalizer. It erases borders, reminds empires of their limits, and humbles even the proudest civilizations. The Romans once called the Mediterranean Mare Nostrum, our sea. Every empire since has tried to claim a piece of it, and every one of them eventually vanished, while the water remained. The sea endures. We visit, we name, we leave. The ocean forgets us, but it keeps our stories in its depths. In that sense, the ocean might be the most honest historian the world has ever had. It records everything in coral growth rings, in sediment layers, in the DNA of creatures that have seen millennia pass. When we study it, we're not just looking at water. We're reading the diary of the Earth itself. Sometimes, when I think about the ocean, I imagine it as the planet's mind, vast, subconscious, and dreaming. Everything we've ever been, every tragedy, every song, every shipwreck, every footprint on the sand, eventually finds its way into the waves. The sea remembers in silence what we forget in noise. And perhaps that's why we feel calmer beside it. Because even if we can't explain it, we sense that the ocean holds the memory of everything and forgives it. It's funny, isn't it? We keep searching the stars for other worlds, when the one beneath our feet, or rather, beneath our boats, is still largely unknown. We look up for mystery, but it's been below us all along. Maybe that's the great irony of humanity. We dream of the cosmos while standing on the edge of infinity every time we visit the beach. So, when you next stare at the horizon, let yourself drift for a while. Don't analyze, don't measure, just listen. The waves you hear tonight might be the same ones that touched the hull of ancient ships, that carried the first explorers, that whispered to the first philosophers. Time collapses in the sound of water, and somewhere in that endless rhythm, between science and soul, between the known and the unknowable, there's peace. Not the peace of stillness, but of motion that never ends. The peace of the sea. If you think about it, human history is really just a long conversation with the ocean. Every civilization that ever rose to greatness did so near water, rivers, coasts, harbors. We like to imagine ourselves as creatures of land. But the truth is, we've always been drawn to the sea like moths to a blue flame. The Egyptians had the Nile, lifeblood of their kingdom. The Greeks had the Aegean, where myths were born with every tide. The Polynesians navigated by stars across the vast Pacific, long before Europe even knew that ocean existed. The sea was never a barrier to them. It was a highway, a liquid map connecting everything, long before maps were drawn. The Vikings crossed stormy waters in their dragon-headed ships, guided by sunstones and instinct. The Chinese sailed massive treasure fleets centuries before Columbus even dreamed of gold. And when Europe finally set its sights westward, the ocean became the stage for one of humanity's most dramatic chapters: exploration, conquest, and sometimes regret. There's a strange duality in that history. The ocean gave us connection, trade, travel, discovery, but also conflict. It brought spices and silk, but also slavery and sorrow. It linked worlds, but it also divided them. Every ship carried both knowledge and ignorance, wonder and greed, courage and fear. When you look at an old sailing map, with its curling edges and drawings of sea monsters, it's easy to see what people were really mapping. Not geography, but emotion. Those dragons in the margins were there because people needed to explain their fear somehow. "Here be monsters," they wrote, which, in modern terms, translates roughly to, "We have no idea what's going on beyond this point." And maybe that's the most honest thing ever printed on a map. Even art owes much to the sea. Painters like J.M.W. Turner tried to capture its fury and light, his canvases dissolving into mist and motion. Writers like Melville turned it into metaphor. Moby Dick isn't just about a whale, it's about the madness of chasing something bigger than yourself. Debussy wrote music inspired by waves. Hemingway set his most tender story in a small fishing boat. Even Shakespeare couldn't resist. Half his plays feature shipwrecks, storms, or drowned lovers. The ocean isn't just scenery and art. It's a character. Sometimes cruel, sometimes kind, but always honest. There's something irresistibly human about projecting our emotions onto the ocean. When we're in love, the sea looks endless and welcoming. When we're heartbroken, it feels cold and infinite. It's as if the water reads us, reflecting whatever we bring to it. That's why people go to the beach after breakups, or to scatter ashes, or to think. The sea is patient enough to listen. It doesn't interrupt. Maybe that's why so many of our oldest rituals involve water. Baptism, purification, healing baths, holy rivers, all ways of saying the same thing. Start again. The sea, with its tides, embodies that perfectly. Every day it withdraws, every day it returns. Loss and renewal, endlessly repeated. The ocean never mourns its own retreat. It simply comes back when it's ready. And there's something deeply comforting about that. We too can retreat. We too can return. Scientists, of course, will tell you that tides are caused by the gravitational pull of the moon. And they're right. But that doesn't make it any less poetic. The moon and the sea have been dancing together for billions of years. One pulls, the other yields. Together, they shape coastlines, guide migrations, and set the rhythm for countless lives. Every wave you see tonight is, in a small way, a conversation between the earth and its silent companion. It's funny how often the things we call romantic turn out to be cosmic physics in disguise. And then there's the sky above the sea, that vast reflection. For ancient sailors, the stars were the only GPS they had. Constellations weren't just pretty dots in the night. They were survival tools. The Polynesians memorized entire star maps, not written on paper, but sung in chants passed from generation to generation. They could tell direction from the angle of a single star, the feel of the wind, the color of the water, even the flight paths of birds. To them, navigation wasn't about dominating the ocean. It was about belonging to it. Compare that to our modern ways. We get nervous when our Wi-Fi drops for 5 seconds. The ancients crossed entire oceans with nothing but memory and courage. And occasionally, yes, a lot of luck. In a sense, we've become disconnected from the ocean, not because it's far away, but because it's so close that we've stopped noticing it. We talk about it as if it's a separate world, the marine environment, as scientists say. But it's not separate at all. The water in your body, the salt in your blood, the air you breathe, all of it once passed through the sea. You are, quite literally, made of ocean. It's a strange thought, but scientifically accurate. The elements that make up our bodies, oxygen, hydrogen, carbon, sodium, magnesium, all originated in the sea at some point in the planet's history. In a very literal sense, we are the ocean's attempt at consciousness. When you stand on the shore and look out at the horizon, you are the universe observing itself through saltwater eyes. It's humbling, isn't it? But also funny because it means we're all, technically speaking, very slow, land-based seaweed. Sentient algae that learn to walk upright and build Wi-Fi routers. And maybe that's why we miss the ocean when we're far from it. Because on some cellular level, we know it's home. Even language reflects that connection. Words like flow, depth, current, and wave show up in our speech all the time, describing not just water, but emotions, ideas, time. We say waves of change, currents of thought, deep feelings. Even in our metaphors, the sea refuses to let go. And it shouldn't, because the ocean, for all its mystery, might be the most honest teacher we have. It teaches us balance between movement and rest, between giving and taking, between strength and surrender. It teaches us that chaos can be beautiful, that the most unpredictable forces can still follow elegant laws of motion, and it teaches us that silence is not emptiness, but space, the kind of space where understanding can grow. There's a quiet wisdom in that. In a world obsessed with noise and certainty, the ocean whispers something different. You don't need all the answers. You just need to keep floating. Of course, floating is harder than it looks. You have to let go just enough to stay buoyant, but not so much that you drift aimlessly. That's balance. That's life. That's the art the ocean has mastered. Maybe that's why so many people describe their lives as waves, rising, falling, cresting, crashing, starting over. The sea shows us that every end is just the beginning of another rhythm. Even the calmest waters hide currents beneath them, slow, unseen, but powerful. And maybe that's true of people too. Some of the quietest souls you'll ever meet have entire oceans inside them. If you could listen closely enough, really listen, you might hear them too. The faint sound of tides moving through their thoughts, the hush of waves beneath their words. There's an old proverb that says, "Only a fool fights the tide." Maybe that's true of life as well. Maybe wisdom isn't about conquering the world, but about learning how to move with it, to ride its changes without fear. The ocean doesn't resist its storms. It absorbs them. It doesn't curse the wind. It dances with it. And when the calm returns, it simply goes on breathing. Perhaps that's what peace really is. Not the absence of movement, but the ability to move without breaking. The ocean has always been the great paradox of life, both constant and ever-changing, both nurturing and merciless, both ancient and newborn with every wave. It is, in many ways, a mirror of existence itself. Every breath you take, every drop of rain, every rhythm your heart keeps is connected to it. And yet, it remains something we can never truly possess. You can stand on its shore, name its parts, measure its depth, but you can never hold the ocean. You can only visit. That's the quiet truth that every sailor, every philosopher, every dreamer eventually learns. The sea does not belong to us. We belong to it. When you think about it, everything that has ever lived, from the first cell to us, began in the sea. Life crawled out of the water, blinked in the sunlight, and spent millions of years pretending to be separate from it. We built walls, nations, languages. And yet, somewhere in our bones, the tide never stopped pulling. Maybe that's why we're always drawn back, to listen, to float, to remember. In the beginning, before continents had names, before mountains rose or skies cleared, the earth was ocean. A restless, shimmering soup of minerals and heat, charged by lightning and time. And in that dark, swirling cradle, something extraordinary happened. Matter learned to organize itself. Molecules became cells. Cells became life. And from that moment on, the ocean became the planet's memory. Every wave that moves today is part of that same ancient rhythm. The same pulse that carried the first plankton, the same motion that shaped the first coral, the same energy that once lifted a ship across an uncharted horizon. It's humbling, isn't it? to realize that when you listen to the sea, you're hearing the oldest song on earth, the one that has no beginning, no chorus, no end, just motion and silence in perfect balance. The Greeks said the ocean was ruled by Poseidon, god of storms and horses, unpredictable, wild, and proud. The Polynesians believed the sea was a living ancestor, a spirit that watched over them. For the Norse, it was a place of challenge, the realm of Jörmungandr, the world serpent. And yet, across all these myths, one truth is shared. The ocean demands respect. It's a teacher disguised as a threat. Myths, in their own way, were humanity's first science, our earliest attempts to describe what we didn't yet understand. Before we could explain tides through gravity, we imagined gods pulling the water with invisible hands. Before we mapped ocean currents, we told stories of sea serpents and sirens. And though we've since replaced those tales with equations and satellites, the awe behind them remains the same. Because the ocean is still, in every scientific sense, magic. We've explored the moon in greater detail than the bottom of our own seas. There are mountains taller than Everest, hidden beneath the waves. Trenches deeper than the height of the Himalayas. The Mariana Trench descends nearly 7 miles into the dark, a place where light never reaches, and yet life still thrives. Creatures down there glow in the darkness, communicating through flashes of living light. Bioluminescence, the poetry of survival. Some of them have never been seen by human eyes. Entire ecosystems exist without sunlight, relying instead on the heat of the Earth's core, turning chemical energy into life. It's as if the ocean keeps a secret world for itself, just to remind us that mystery is not something to be solved, but something to be honored. When scientists first sent cameras into the deep, they expected emptiness. What they found was abundance, proof that life always finds a way. Even in crushing pressure and eternal night, existence adapts. That resilience, that quiet insistence on continuing, feels almost spiritual. Maybe that's the true nature of the ocean. Not chaos, not power, but persistence. And there's something profoundly comforting in that idea. Because if the sea can endure asteroids, ice ages, and the weight of human ambition, maybe we can endure too. Think of how often we describe our emotions in oceanic terms. Waves of sadness, depths of joy, a sea of thoughts. We instinctively compare our inner world to the ocean because, deep down, we know they're the same. Our minds have tides, moments of clarity and storm, of calm and confusion. We ebb, we flow, we retreat, we return. In that way, the ocean isn't just a place. It's a metaphor for consciousness. The surface may be busy, full of noise and reflection, but below lies a stillness so deep that it humbles every thought. To dive within oneself is to dive into the sea. Both are vast, both are beautiful, both are slightly terrifying if you go too far without a light. And yet, that's where understanding lives, in the depths. The philosopher Alan Watts once said, "You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop." It sounds poetic, but it's also scientifically and philosophically accurate. The same elements, the same patterns, the same logic that shape the cosmos are reflected in every one of us. We're made of stardust, yes, but it's the sea that turned that dust into something living. So when you stand before the ocean and feel small, remember, you're not standing before it. You're standing within it. You are what it's been trying to say all along. For thousands of years, humans have written poems about the sea, painted it, sailed it, feared it, worshipped it. And through all those centuries, one truth has never changed. We keep returning to it not just to explore, but to remember who we are. Every story of courage, of discovery, of loss, it all flows back into the water. The sea holds not just the memory of the earth, but the memory of us. The wrecks resting on the seabed, Roman ships, Viking vessels, wooden galleons. They are our time capsules. They remind us that even the strongest creations of humankind eventually sink, and that's okay. Because the ocean doesn't destroy, it transforms. It turns our endings into beginnings, our ruins into reefs. Even in loss, it creates life. That perhaps is its greatest lesson. The ocean doesn't cling, it lets go. It gives, takes, renews. Every wave that crashes on the shore is the ocean's way of saying, nothing lasts. And that's all right. Maybe that's why sitting by the sea feels so peaceful. Because it teaches us the truth we spend our lives trying to ignore. Everything changes. Everything returns. Everything is forgiven. So, as you listen now, the rhythm of the waves, the pulse of breath, the stillness between them, let yourself drift. Imagine the water as it moves across the earth, touching every shore, carrying every story. Imagine how, in its depths, there is no past or future, only motion, only being. That's what the ocean teaches us. To exist without needing to define it. To move without needing to arrive. To breathe simply because we can. Somewhere out there in the middle of the Pacific, a wave is forming. It begins as nothing, a ripple, a whisper. But it will travel thousands of miles, maybe even reach a shore you'll never see. It will rise, crest, fall, and become another wave. It will exist for a moment, and then disappear, not lost, but changed. That's life in its simplest form. And maybe, as you close your eyes tonight, you'll hear that same rhythm in your heartbeat. A pulse shaped by time, memory, and the sea itself. Because no matter where you are, inland, in a city, under stars or snow, the ocean is still with you. It flows through your veins. It echoes in your breath. It hums beneath the surface of everything. And that's the secret of the ocean. It was never just out there. It was always within you. Good night.